Merry Vlogmas, day 24, Christmas Eve. It is almost Christmas morn. Merry Christmas, Christmas Eve. We're on day 24. Here we go, the last night. And tomorrow, in an hour, is Christmas. So let's see. This is the big chocolate. And it is a chocolate Santa. Chocolate Santa. Or it's a carol. Yeah, it's Santa. Chocolate Santa. Let's get started. Welcome in, Penguins Master. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Mike Beachman, thank you for joining. We're getting started here. Sorry. Just wanna. But today's story, the final story, Disney's Mickey's Christmas Carol. Disney's Mickey Christmas Carol. I hope you guys all enjoy your morning with your children, your older children, nephews, nieces, grandchildren. But here you go. It was Christmas Eve and Ebenezer Scrooge was rushing through snowy London. Scrooge didn't like Christmas and he didn't believe in helping others and helping the poor. He barged past carolers and wouldn't give a penny to anyone. Even when Scrooge's nephew Fred stopped by his office shouting, "Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge!" Scrooge kicked him out. A while later, Scrooge's assistant Bob Cratchit stepped down from his stool to go home. "I suppose you'll be wanting tomorrow," Scrooge barked, "but be here all the earlier the next day." "Thank you, Mr. Scrooge," cried Bob, "and Merry Christmas," he called as he went. "Bah, humbug," muttered Scrooge. Later that night, Scrooge locked up his office and went home. As he went to open the front door, Scrooge took a closer look at his door knocker. He gasped. Oh, and the knocker was the face of his old business partner, Jacob Marley. The face began to move, then softly called Scrooge. Frightened, Scrooge raced inside, but soon enough the ghost of his former partner appeared in front of him, chains circling his body. "Tonight you will be visited by 3 spirits," boomed Marley. "Listen to them. Do what they say, or your chains will be forever heavier than mine. Farewell, Ebenezer." Scrooge went to bed, but not long later he was awoken by a little figure in a top hat. "I'm the ghost of Christmas past," he told Scrooge. "You must come with me." But Scrooge laughed. "Look how small you are. Go away." "Silence," ordered the spirit. "If men were measured by kindness, you would be smaller than a grain of sand. We are going back to a time when Christmas was not humbug." The spirit commanded Scrooge grab hold of his coattails, and remembering Marley's terrible warning, he held on. The windows flew open, and instantly they were soaring over rooftops and chimneys, and the spirit's little umbrella keeping them afloat. Welcome in, Hunter Mars. Soon they landed outside a brightly lit house. Joyful Christmas music filled the air. Peering through the window, Scrooge couldn't believe his eyes. "Why, it's Isabel," he cried, suddenly remembering the girl he had once loved. But who's the dancing? But who's she dancing so merrily with? That man was you, Scrooge, replied the spirit, in the days when two were kind and cheerful. Then the spirit whisked Scrooge away to another scene. Inside, Scrooge, of many years before, sat behind a desk covered in money. Isabel stood in front of him, tears in her eyes. "Why isn't Isabel crying?" asked Scrooge. Then he remembered he had taken Isabel's home from her when she could not pay her bills and refused to marry her. Suddenly, Scrooge found himself back in bed. He thought it had been a dream, but then his thoughts turned to Isabel and how his chance of happiness with her had been ruined by his love of money. Scrooge put his head down and sobbed into his pillow. As he cried, Scrooge felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. He sat up, and beside his bed was a fierce-looking giant feasting. "I am the ghost's Christmas present," he boomed. "There's no time to lose." And with that, the spirit picked Scrooge up and put him in his pocket. He then pushed open the roof and stepped outside as though from a dollhouse. Welcome in, Kathy Hollister. Merry Christmas to you. Sorry about that. Mouth gets like super dry. Scrooge peeked out of the giant's pocket. "I wonder where we're going," he said to himself. Pulling Scrooge from his pocket, the spirit tore a street light from the ground to use as a lantern as he walked through the streets. Soon they arrived at a tiny rundown home. "What a dreadful little house!" Scrooge exclaimed. "Who would live in such a place? Perhaps a miserable beggar?" "Look close, Scrooge, and tell me who you see," said the spirit. Scrooge pressed his face against the glass for a better look. "Why, it's Bob Cratchit, my clerk," he said with a surprise. "Does he live here?" The spirit scowled. "Look at how he lives, thanks to your generosity. Look at the food his family must eat on Christmas Eve because it's all they could afford." The hungry Cratchit family sat at their table, about to carve up the smallest goose Scrooge had ever seen. Scrooge watched a boy named Tiny Tim hobble into the room, leaning on a little crutch. He gave thanks to Scrooge for the meal, and Scrooge felt ashamed. "Tell me, spirit, what's wrong with that kind lad?" asked Scrooge. "Much, I'm afraid," the spirit replied. "If these shadows remain unchanged, I see an empty chair where Tiny Tim once sat." Suddenly, the scene went dark, and Scrooge was alone. Church bells toiling in the distance. Sorry about that. It's kind of dry. Sorry. I do apologize. Just then, swirling smoke engulfed Scrooge, growing thicker and thicker until he couldn't see anything around him. The smoke blew into his nose and he coughed. As the smoke lifted, Scrooge found himself standing in a cemetery. There were tombstones everywhere, covered by snow. Scrooge looked up to find he was no longer alone. A horrible shadow, his face hidden inside a cloak, stood silently before him. "Are you the ghost of Christmas future?" stammered Scrooge. Tell me, tell me what will happen to Tiny Tim." The spirit just looked at Scrooge, then raised his arm to point to something in the distance. Scrooge looked to where the spirit was pointing and saw Bob Cratchit and his family gathered around a tombstone. Bob knelt before a little gravestone, tears rolling down his face, and gently laid Tiny Tim's crutch on top. "Oh no!" Scrooge cried. "Spirit, I didn't want this to happen. Tell me these changes haven't happened yet. Welcome, Andre Lasha. Merry Christmas." Thank you for joining. Scrooge noticed two gravediggers working. "I never seen a funeral like this," one of them said. "No mourners, no friends to bid farewell." Scrooge peered into the grave and asked the spirit, "Who does it belong to?" "Why, it's yours, Ebenezer," the spirit laughed, as his blood fell from his face. "No, I'll change," cried Scrooge. The grave burst into flames, and the spirit pushed him in. "Let me out!" screamed Scrooge. "Let me!" Suddenly a bell tolled, and as Scrooge opened his eyes, he cried with joy. He was back in his bedroom. "It's Christmas morning," he exclaimed. He threw on his coat and hat and raced for the door. He ran out onto the street calling "Merry Christmas" to everyone he met. He gave two men a bag of coins each, who stood there speechless, wondering what had changed in grumpy old Scrooge. Yes, so do I, Dre. I like a lot of different versions, too. This is a nice cartoon version, Mickey's Christmas Carol. Scrooge even stopped his nephew when he saw him approaching in a wagon. Fred was so surprised by his uncle's cheerfulness that he almost fell off his carriage. Waving goodbye to his nephew, Scrooge continued on his way to Bob Cratchit's house. Rat-a-tat! Scrooge knocked on his door. Bob opened the door, and his face fell when he saw who it was. "Why, Mr. Scrooge, Merry Christmas! Won't you come in?" he said. Scrooge stomped inside and dropped the heavy sack on the floor. Scrooge then broke into a massive smile and told Bob he was getting a pay raise, and he brought food and toys for his family. Bob Cratchit couldn't believe it. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Scrooge." "Merry Christmas, Bob," Scrooge said, as the whole family danced with joy. It was a Christmas miracle. "And God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim. There you have it. Merry Vlogmas 24. We counted down to Christmas. Tomorrow is Christmas Day, so Merry Christmas to everyone. And thank you for following along. Have a great night. Have a blessed day. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, Karki, Dre, Penguins Master, Kathy, Mike Beachman. Thank you all for stopping in. Have a great night, and we will see you. There might be a Christmas video to watch. So, have a great night, everyone, and we will see you later. I hope you all had a great Christmas Eve, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a great day.